see that this is just a better picture. Seems to be a little bit more stable. It's not going to be as long as the other ones. I just wanted to see what this is going to look like. So this is the figure, color test figure for a Blood Bowl team. And the idea is to have some of these primer painted figures. Get a little closer so you can see it. Match that. Here you can see some in between stages. So you can see things carried a little bit further. This is kind of the way things go. There's so many other things that I'm working on. You just can't quite see them here on the table. Sometimes you just have to bounce, not just from one project to the next, but even within a project, you have to kind of bounce around a little bit. So what I've got is some Secret Weapon paints. It's basically part of the Rust series. I could use any other yellow paints. I've done that too. I've actually used some Reaper Clears, especially the clear yellow, to get some brighter colors. Now what I've got to do is, this is the other challenge. If everybody was just this, I think this is a blitzer right here. If everybody was just this pose, I could just kind of copy it over and over again. But here you can see the witch elves have a very different pose. The armor is different on every single one of these. Just based off of the start pictures that I had, this is different here. These pads on the legs. I just got to figure out, well, am I going to go ahead with the yellow pants underneath? So I'll do that. I think I'll just have those thigh pads. Well, really more like thigh armor. I'll probably have to go with more of a bluish black. Now this, from previous miniatures, had to be in the yellow range. One of the reasons I enjoy the Reaper paints and the Secret Weapon paints is they're really flexible in terms of, do you use them opaque? No, right now this is semi-opaque. It's been thinned down. I think you can see how the way this is flowing, that it's definitely thinned down. Let's get this where you can see it. This was an unusual color scheme to figure out here. It's one of the reasons why I've got the chat function turned off, because I'm busily in my head thinking, all right, what parts do I need to make a certain color? In most cases, this is how I have to do things. It's even more complicated with the historicals these days, because as you take, say, this guy here, you've got the P dot camo on him, and seeing how well that focuses. Wow, yeah. This, I'm really liking this. This is the best focus I've ever seen. So it may indeed have something to do with how the internet is working. So again, this is not anywhere near as complete a lesson, if you want to call it that, as the other YouTube lives have been. This is really more for me to get a judgment on, well, what's the capabilities of this? So what can I do on future ones? And as I see this, wow, this is really nice. Now, of course, the chat's not turned on. That might have something to do with it. And you can see this is nowhere near as dark as the darkest yellow on the color test figure. It's also nowhere near as bright as the brightest yellows. It's really all part of the plan. Typically, I start in the middle and work my way out towards the light and towards the dark. Couple reasons for that. Saves time, because if you start from your darkest dark and you have to work all the way back up, it just takes more time. Believe me, that's by experience, because that's how we started out. When we first were doing the miniatures, people said, well, you have to prime them black, and you have to just start with the next latest layer and the next latest layer. And it was not unusual for me to take a week to paint just one miniature like this. That's with no special effects. That's certainly not with a bunch of skulls on the base. Now, I know some people have asked, so how do you got those miniatures on there? Why do you mount them? So here is, so we got this blue tack here. There's a billion different kinds. This just happens to be Loctite. You can see it's flexible like so. We got a whole bunch of these juice lids. Now these are old dead paint jars, but you can see it's just enough for me to be able to grab onto. I don't know if I've ever actually done this except say on a hangout or whatever. So I got a couple of pieces here. These bases are totally flat underneath. So I'm going to stretch this out so it's really thin. I'm going to set it right here. Take this miniature, kind of seat that in there, and now that my base has some paint on, so that's really secure. It's not going anywhere. I don't want to take too much time to do this on a whole bunch of these, but as I was holding that in my hand and it was about to fall out, I said, oh yeah, this is what I didn't do yet. So I'll just get a couple of these out. I've got so many miniatures here, but you can't, well, let's see, I'm going to move the camera. See that? That vast horde over there? I know it's out of focus. That's so that he's good right here. So I'm going to grab, let's get this guy right here. Now, you see this thing sitting here? That's how I make a wet palette. You know, a lot of people have watched my oil painting demos. When I'm working with my oil paints, I don't have to worry about a wet palette. But, you know, here, paint's going to dry. There's a lot of fans blowing in this room, which it's going to make that stuff dry even faster. So you can see is I'm not worrying about what's getting covered up here. It is not a big deal because as you can see, that's some pretty dark paint. It's going to go in the crevices of those shoulder pads. So no sense in making basically extra work for myself. I can just paint this whole thing yellow, slap it on there, and then get a little more precise when I go to paint in my darker colors. Basically sort of a bluish, dark bluish gray, close to black, but not actually black. So again, that like it says in the title, this is not supposed to be how to paint some kind of contest winning figure or whatever. The whole point of this, the whole notion behind this is just how do you approach a team of figures or an army of figures? Got a couple dozen of these Russians here. So I'm going to try and do this almost every day. Here's an example. All right, so I've got my color here. This also happens to usually be a base for golds. So while I got it, maybe I just do this. Again, you can see the same approach, just keep that on there. It's going to be the same thing here. All of this stuff, it's been pre-shaded exactly just like Blood Bowl figures. This is why I have that giant horde of figures that you saw. I think you can see that. Here on this blade hilt here, I know I want that to be more of a gold. This is certainly going to be more of a gold. This is where you can see that transparency. Because you can see it's not covering. And I know maybe it's not as much now, but company would make these paint lines where the paint it covers everything in one coat. Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine, especially if that's how it helps you to get your painting done. But for me, that really more or less kind of gets in the way. So I'll throw some more of this out here. And just, it's like I was saying, I'm picking out areas here. This will be tricky because the armor set on this is completely different. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do on him. And these, I'm sure these are the same kind of decisions that you've had to go through when you're trying to paint some kind of army, a team, whatever. Because you are not painting 5, 10, 15, 20 of the exact same figure. You're probably painting maybe the same pose 3 times. I think even in this team, there's a couple of linemen that are in the same pose, maybe. Obviously, plastic figures let you change the poses around and get a little more variety that way. But usually, if it's a 10-man squad, you usually have 3 times 3. 3 of the same pose 3 times. That lets you work into a little bit more of a rhythm and really determine, all right, this part of the armor, I want it to be this color. This team was complicated because, as I get my test one, you also had to have the guy's number inside a Swiss flag. It was supposed to be on the shoulder pad. Well, no way to do that with these things on the shoulder pads. Normally, we would like to do stuff on the helmet, but you didn't want that on the helmet. And all of these crests here, the different crests of, I guess, the houses of Switzerland. That's another challenge because I had no idea there were 31 separate crests. And guess what? There was not going to be 31 of those on a 30 millimeter base. So compromise had to be found. And I said, I can squeeze, I think it was 8 of them on there. So what I'll do is rotate 8 different ones on each of the figures, which not going to be super easy in itself, but at least I'll have them memorized. So I think I'm going to want the undersides of these to be yellow because I think one of these top pads is going to have to be red so that I can get a numeral in there. Now this guy also has more skin tone than some of the other ones because I'm pretty sure he's an assassin. Essentially all of the right legs here have to be straight up yellow, and then the other ones, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a little bit of a stripe there, but even that was difficult because they had those spikes just like this. So there's always, with each one of these, as neat as the figures are, there's kind of like a little bit of an obstacle. It's almost like a little obstacle course on each one that I have to run. Again, this would be easier to paint sitting on one of my little figure holders, and I may just do that too. I think before I mess with these 3, I might do that again. These are, again, not super dramatic, life-changing tips, but what they might do is make your painting life a little bit easier. I'm not going to be talking a lot of color theory here. This is more basic construction. So again, same thing. Pull it out, get him stuck in there. Don't want to snap him off. They are pinned to the bases. There was a time where we painted every figure like this. See how it's stuck on this dowel rod here? So actually looking at this, I'm just going to get it in front of the screen. Yeah, let's see how big that... I want to get the sword up there. Yeah. So this focus is looking pretty nice. Now, I'm several days behind schedule with all of this stuff because, as I mentioned earlier, there was some internet issues going on here, as in we didn't have any. Turns out there's just the house is kind of conspiring against us. The line coming into the house from the alley had a crack in it, which meant any time water got in there, our internet would just disappear and then come right back as soon as it dried. So there we go. So he's a little bit easier to grab onto now. And Kathy, she tried to do a live stream on Sunday, and it bounced her right in the middle of her stream. I tried doing some YouTube lives the next day, and it bounced me twice. And then it led to this long odyssey of replacing the modem only to find out that one didn't work. Finally, somebody had to come out here, replace that wire, replace the modem. And even then, it still wasn't working right. So to say it's been a challenge is a massive understatement. And now we find out that we basically have to have a new roof put on the house, which is another massive expense. And well, it's one of those things that hopefully the Patreon page can help with. That's just James Wapple Patreon. And the idea is with these YouTube lives, they would essentially also be like a live session for the Patreons. So let's say you subscribe, I don't know if it's the $10 or the $5, whatever, but this one right here is actually a private session. So speaking of Patreon, they will be the first people to see this because only they can see it when I give them the link because of its setting. And I appreciate what all the Patreon folks do because it's made more of this possible, because there's a lot of other things involved in painting miniatures besides painting. Shipping miniatures, which, stupid as this sounds, I actually have at least 2 blog posts on how to do that. I've got at least 4 blog posts on how to photograph miniatures. Those might also be potential, say, YouTube lives or some kind of tutorial session. Just show people how I go about lighting the miniatures, but in a simple way. Because I see some people that they must spend hours photographing their miniatures. And as you can see, I don't have hours to spend photographing these hundreds of miniatures that I paint. Basically, I have a way that works pretty well, especially for the vast amount of figures I've got to do. It's also a really inexpensive way, which I think just about everybody can identify with. So you can see again, we're not standing on ceremony here. This is not delicate in any way, shape, or form. It's just get the paint on there, slap it on, make it work. Because that one right here started out exactly as what you see. Even this right here, the color test figure, started out just like the figures that you're seeing me work on here. So I'm going to get one more figure mounted. I think I must have hundreds of these stupid little caps that we saved. My favorite is the old paint jars, but we only have so many of those. There's only so many. So this guy here, now he has some kind of leggings here. So the yellow, not going to be as much. His cloak, well, I don't really want that to be yellow, because an assassin when a yellow cloak is just going to look silly. So we're going to call a change here. Now again, remember, the whole thing of wanting that number and a symbol, that assassin's going to have to be done this way, right here, because there are no shoulder pads. Well, there's shoulder pads, but they got skulls on them. So I'm going to have to utilize this little thing right here, which is, well, typical of most Blood Bowl figures. So that's it. Once I get to be about to the end of that yellow paint, I can throw some more out there, or I can just say, you know what, it's time to change tack. Actually, that is a mask maybe on him. Might have to make that one yellow too. So I'm just gonna set this guy off to the side here. And I have to look. So one of my next thing I gotta work on, have to get some black paint in here, but we're not gonna use black. We're gonna use Jim's favorite liner paints. So we got those out. Brown and blue liner. And guess what? Brown and blue together makes black with a tint. Let's say I put a little more blue in there, which I've got. It's going to give my black, in the air quotes that you can't see, it's going to make that look a little bit more bluish, a little more of a bluish tint. See, on camera, even if this was in total sharp focus, it would register as black. But again, it's not. The other thing I like about the clear paints, or the liner paints, is you can water those down quite a bit, and they, see how they flow really nicely. Again, these are my same craft brushes that I use, and you see these using these all the time. It's a set of 12. You don't even have to go into a Hobby Lobby. You can just order those from the Hobby Lobby website. If you can't get to one, or there's no Hobby Lobby by you, I'm sure there's a Michael's that has something real similar, or whatever craft store. Dick Blick, that's another kind of an art catalog type store. I ordered all my oil paints from them online. So this may look like I'm just painting a solid black here, but it's not, believe it or not. It's actually a wash in a way. It's a glaze. See, I can even take some of that away. Got my sponges here. I can take some of that away, and all of a sudden now I even have a tiny bit of shading on there. So these again are the calculations that you make. And I also made sure that as I picked up this guy here, all of the yellow trim that I did, well, that was dry because I didn't really want that to bleed together. So you can see as I'm just going to shove the brush down in there. It's a lot easier than trying to paint around that. This is, again, it's ways you can save time. It doesn't seem like much. You might say, well, that saved you a few seconds. Well, a few seconds times a lot is a lot. I just keep making catchphrases on this YouTube channel here, and I keep forgetting them. Keep forgetting my own catchphrases. So again, let's see what happens. I watered that down a little bit more. I'm just going to throw that over the top of that. And then take a different sponge here. Take some away. So what I might do is give that a little more of a purplish look when it comes time, because the skin tone is sort of a purplish gray. So why not reflect that somewhere else on the figure? I think I already did it on one of them. So let's work our way around this. And again, I'm not going to get too bogged down in this, because this is really not, you're not looking to see how to paint a Blood Bowl figure. This is It's more about how you can approach large numbers of figures. More of a this is just how Jim works every day. Because I'm sure there's some of you watching this that have probably thought about doing miniature painting, maybe not for your entire living, but maybe a decent portion of it. So that's what this also is about too, is maybe how somebody that wants to do more with their miniature painting than just paint their own stuff. It's, again, you don't have to be like me, where everything you do is a big giant commission piece and that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be that. I think they just real quickly establishing the lights and darks. So you can see basically a starting stage. We've got kind of a middle stage here. And I would also see now that I got this blue-black going, that is where, let's say I've got something like this. Because this guy right here involves a lot of these same bluish black, that brown and blue liner mix. So I always have figures sitting on the table that say, oh yeah, this color will be perfect right, boom, here. I'll show you some other things in a second. I'm just going to throw a few little splashes on this guy. Sorry if he's not on camera. It's about 4:30 in the morning here, and it's been a really long day. It's not been the most fun day in the world. So my voice is probably going to be a little gravelly because I've been talking all day long. My voice is not necessarily used to that. So this boot is probably going to be more of a brownish color, so I won't get too involved in that. That strap right there is also going to be more of a brownish color, but that's something I can deal with at another time. Don't have to worry about it right now. So yeah, the glove, again, I think on that first one, they were sort of a dark reddish brown that was toned down a little bit with some gray. And since this is kind of a watery, it's not, I'm not just slapping on. Look at how watery this is. It's controlled. It's not just wild, going all over the place, but it's enough to help it flow. And it actually gives it a little bit of appreciating in a way. So let's get this side of his pants here with all of these crazy little spikes on it. Not quite sure how comfortable the spiked pants are to wear, especially when you're trying to run around, landing on the ground. But then that's Blood Bowl for you. So again, gloves, probably going to be more towards the brown. So we'll leave him be. We'll set him off to the side. We'll move on to the next one here. And the idea is, you do it and you move on. Do it, move on. You don't want to linger too long. Another reason, there's the practical side. Got to get all this stuff done. Got to keep projects moving. But there's another side too, and I see this happen a lot. People get bored with a project because they're painting the same thing over and over again, and it starts out fine. They're all excited about it. Then, week 5, month number 3, who knows, a year into the project now, they're just bored as heck, and they don't even want to see it anymore. And they'll say, and understandably, I'm not really into miniature painting, not really into miniatures, don't want to be painting right now. In some ways, they just don't want to be painting that same old stuff right now. You give them something different to paint, might have a whole different thought process on that. I know that's for me. I don't get to, obviously, something needs to be done, but it is one way for me to just try and keep things fresh is to just say, you know what, okay, just can't deal with more of these guys right now. I'm gonna split it up with this. I think this is a Eldorado figure right here. I'll just, if I have any kind of color that matches that, and oh look, I've got these to work on, which, gee, match a lot of the colors you just saw on that kind of genie type figure. So when you have similar, even though the project's completely different, they're all for three different things, three different people. These are going off to Switzerland here once they're done. But yet there's elements that are in common, whether it's colors, maybe it's just the basing. When I base figures, I don't just make enough bases for whatever the immediate thing is that I'm doing, because even basing can get boring. So I try and say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to make a bunch of cobblestone bases too. I don't even have a project for them yet, but I know, well, it's a cobblestone base. You can throw just about anything on a cobblestone base, and it looks natural. Not even going to bother messing with those stupid little spikes right now, because once I go after my yellow to lighten that up, I'm just going to paint over them anyway. So I guess that's another thing too when you're talking about that painting efficiency that you learn is when to not even bother trying to paint something. Because when I was first doing this, you can bet that I sat there with my little tiny brush and I was trying not to touch this area or that area or whatever. And I said, wait a minute, this is stupid. It was years later that I made that realization. I said, wait a second, why am I doing this? I ended up repainting all that stuff anyway. Why did I waste time? And this Blood Bowl team, there's I think a total of 20 figures if you include the turn marker and the score marker and stuff. If I can save, let's say I save 10 minutes a figure, 200 minutes, I could paint entire figures in 200 minutes. So even just saving myself some time here and there on each one. Yep, I'll give him a black hood here. So I hope this is on screen. If it's not, I apologize, but there's not really a lot that I'm doing here that's you probably haven't already done yourself in a way. Maybe not quite so much with this more liquid approach. Probably not with the liner paints. But see, even as this dries, I think you can see there's a little bit of shading to that. And that's something I can then build off of when I say start to get into some of the lighter colors, the lighter midtones. Because there was a time where I just probably would have painted all this stuff black. What you see here that looks like black, I just would have taken out the black and painted it all like that. And not that that's wrong. That's okay. But it wouldn't have been really the best use of time. So I think that's another reason I just kind of chose something simple here, where I had established most of the colors, but not all of them. And like I said, this is normally I'd have the chat going, it would be public and stuff, but my brain is not able to answer questions right now. And I still wanted to do this just to test out the new internet. And like I said, it's looking pretty good, because before, on the earlier attempts at doing this, the playback, sometimes it'd be crystal clear, sometimes be distorted. Sometimes my motion would almost look like a stop camera, kind of herky-jerky. And I think this will be good. So what are we, about 35 minutes in here? Oops, sorry, that got close to the camera. But this is another, all of this stuff, trying to show concepts here that aren't necessarily the easiest to just explain. Because what I want people to see is that, say, at the end of 45 minutes, they see figures that not only do they look like they've got their colors down, but they've even got some preliminary shading. That's what I like people to see here. Hey, wait a minute. He really only spent, right now, 36 minutes? And, we took time to show you the blue tack stuff and everything else. So this, the inside of this, here, I'll turn it so you can see it. And I just slapped all the yellow in there. Poof. Now, black-ish. The reason I did that, well, can you imagine if this was all dark and having to paint yellow over the top of black? So now I don't have to deal with that. I got my black in there, I got my yellow in there, without having to agonize over, oh my gosh, how is my yellow paint going to cover? Didn't have to worry about that. There's nothing to cover. What was and remember too, this is the cheap solution to a wet palette. If you cut off the air circulation to something, it's going to stay wet for quite a while. If I wanted to even enhance this, I could spritz a few dots of water into here, and that would almost act like a terrarium. So, because wet palettes, again, I'm a watercolorist by trade, so I don't really need a wet palette. I know a lot of people love those, but what if you don't have it with you? You're just, maybe you're at a game store or whatever, and all of a sudden you find yourself painting. And you just think, man, I really wish I had a wet palette or my wet palette. Well, if you're go into the vending machine and get yourself a bottled water or something like that, well, or an orange, whatever, that has a larger cap. Who knows? You could use one cap to hold your miniature and the other cap to stick over your paint. That's when I first started using these. They were actually for that reason. You can see I also use them for carrying my water. Actually, there's another little tip that I've got for people after I slap in the paint here. I'll show you real quick. See how that paint is just as good as when I first slapped it down, but paint outside of that has already dried. So let's just get a little more of the darker tone here. Again, all of this stuff is going to get shaded. There's going to be some extra little kind of bluish gray hints added to that. Oop, don't want to forget this right here. And the reason I didn't do the yellow on that yet is I'm not necessarily sure I want those outer things to be. I might change those. What am I looking? Here we go. I don't know. Sunny Delight, these orange juice containers. There's a whole bunch of different shapes. Here's one over here. These make, I'll say Tropicana. These actually make interesting plinths, especially if you put them on maybe a larger wooden plaque that kind of fits well with this. I've painted these up as marble, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's another kind of a little cheap solution there if you're looking to dress it up a little bit with some type of plinth, but not fork out a whole bunch of money for a plinth. I think it was at ReaperCon, I don't know, very first one I did, how many years ago? where I happened to have one of those. I was using it as a water dish, and I wanted to show somebody how to make a plinth for a Reaper Bones figure of all things. So it was a Bones figure on a like Sunny Delight cap for a plinth. It was the ultimate in economy, I can tell you that. This is the other reason why I usually put these things on something is it's probably harder for you to see what the heck I'm doing here. So again, this is another one where I just partially in my fatigue, I forgot to put some yellow stuff on the trim there, but it is not a big deal. Not a big deal. We can work around that. Just get in here with that darker blue and brown, and let's see. So this shoulder pad's going to end up being red, but by throwing this dark color first, when I throw my red over the top of that, the whole idea is that it's not going to cover that easily, that it is actually going to, some of that darker color is going to show through. Because now, just by virtue of painting my red on there flat, or essentially flat, I got some shading there. It's time saved instead of trying to do a bunch of glazes to darken that red. It starts out darker. Such a small area, it's not going to take long to make it more red. So let's see, is that a mask on him? Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to make that dark. What the heck? Poof, like that. And all that stuff is just kind of chilling out. What I'm going to do, I'm going to find me some kind of blue here. I'm just going to grab something that might be, what have we got here? There was this verdigris blue. I wanted to try this stuff out here. Yeah. I just want to see what happens. It's from Secret Weapon. It's technically another one of their weathering paints. It's, as you can imagine, it's technically supposed to be for a verdigris effect, but hey, that's kind of a nifty looking blue, which I will gray down and darken down. Again, Secret Weapon paints, the liner paints, kind of made for doing this. You can see it's not making everything completely dark. There we go. Just going to let this settle down into the crevices. Again, hopefully you can see this, because definitely fatigue really starting to settle in. It's another point of discussion, actually, because you sit down to paint after a long day at work and taking care of the kids and everything else. You may not be in the physical or mental state of doing all these little detailed crests. That maybe that's something you wait. If there's freehand on this guy too. This kind of stuff here. Maybe you do what I'm doing here. You do I call it the grunt work, basically. Not very glorious, not really taxing on the brain, I guess we could call it that, which may be just the thing you need. Because painting, when it's your hobby does suggest enjoyment, relaxation, not pressure and dread and terror. So maybe that's one way to turn it into a less stressful thing. Is just, all right, you know what? I need to make progress on this team, on this army, on this bust, whatever it is, or series of busts. And maybe just say, okay, I could do. I'm not going to tackle that detail freehand. I'm not going to try and paint the eyes right now. My hand-eye coordination's not there. I'm distracted because I know I'm massively distracted about a million things right now, not the least of which trying to see, how is this doing focus-wise? Am I dropping frames? Now you may be trying to make sure that the kids aren't trying to set fire to the house or whatever. We all have different concerns usually while we're working on our painting. So let's just gonna grab some kind of a lighter blue here and see how that mixes in with our verdigris blue. Now, this may end up sort of being some minor, wet into wet here. Set you off to the side, grab you, and so this is obviously one of those digital sculpts, and digital sculpts tend to make the hair into more solid masses. So let's do this. And I'm just gonna follow the texture instead of, because I've seen people painting like this. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why not go with the grain of how it's sculpted? That's what I'm trying to do here. Just trying to follow the grain that was established by the sculptor. Work with the sculptor. Don't fight the sculptor. No reason to be doing that. So hopefully, trying to give this a little bit of a kind of an electric blue look, because these, for those of you not familiar with Blood Bowl, these witch elves are some of the nastier / more important players of all the different types of teams and the positions you can have out there. They just, especially once they start to acquire skills. I'm just picturing a 4-strength witch elf with tackle or frenzy or something like that. That was actually one of the reasons I did Blood Bowl back in the day. Part of it was the only game that my friends played, at least as far as miniatures games go. And actually, many of my first teams, I scratch sculpted them because I had no other way to get the figures. So I remember scratch sculpting bull centaurs. So I think there's going to be more of these type of YouTube live. Not every single one can have the big old chat room going and merry times back and forth. Sometimes they will just have to be more like this, where you hear my voice only. Well, not that you hear other people. Like I said, I can focus more on the task at hand. And there's a lot I've got to focus on right now. So I just grabbed a lighter, and I'm going to go back to my first one here. And you can see the whole time, what have I been using? I've been using one of these big old craft brushes. When they're new, like I've said so many times, if any of you have seen any of my tutorial videos before, you know that when they're pristine, they have a really nifty point on them. But it's a point that holds a whole bunch of paint, because I'm pretty sure at least a few of you have noticed that I have yet to go back and get more paint. Silly as it may sound, it's another time saving. And here, you know what? There's decent enough texture there. I'm going to take this brush, actually put it on its side, use the edge of the brush, and get some light some light blue there. So I think the other one is about ready for its light blue. And I'm just going to make sure this gets covered up there. So I've just created my wet palette. A little more here. So I think what I'll do is just for the heck of it, just throw it up as a little bonus to the patrons here. They'll get to see this first and probably do a couple of more for them. I like this format. This is kind of neat. I also want to make more edited type videos. Where I show a scene, working on some part of it that I kind of cut the scene and I say, okay, now I'm going to tackle more glazing and set up the palette in the work area for specifically that task. Here it's more of a, again, I've been using the expression potluck. Just not quite sure what it is you're going to get. I wasn't really sure. In fact, I thought it was going to be something entirely different than this. It was supposed to be. But just when you do this for, well, heck, I'm sure in your lives, the first, your plan for the day was usually wiped out by the time you dragged yourself out of bed. Something happened at work. Something happened with the kids, the house, the whatever, the car, the dog, the cat. Because, yeah, pets never barf in weird places or any of that never ever happens. You usually find those things days later when the less developed human sense of smell finally runs across them. So I'm almost at, I'm almost an hour in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this to one level lighter here, and who knows, maybe tomorrow night pick this up again. This is a little bit of a test because when I do the more edited versions, those are something I can put on a USB and actually give people hard copies of. Obviously, it exists on YouTube, but there is no other hard copy of it. Anyway, it's not on my hard drive somewhere. It's not quite the same as me going in with the editing software and such. So I'm just trying to add as many different approaches for myself as I can. So one last, I may take this a few steps more beyond this, and I may do a glaze of purple in the shadows in some places. I was really thinking about that because, again, there's that purple in the skin tone. So here, yep, there we go. Now I've got Winsor Newton Series 7 sable brushes, the 000s and all that. And there are definitely times where I use most likely the skin that I paint on this, the eyes, mouth, the vast majority of those little crazy shields that go around the base. Yeah, it's probably going to be tackled with the Series 7. But this saves wear and tear on those. Maybe it's not an issue when you only paint a few figures over the course of a year. Well, yeah. But if you're anything like me and you're painting Blood Bowl teams and armies and or maybe larger monster type figures, well, those are going to be rougher on your brushes and it's going to take its toll on them. Why not use a brush you maybe don't care about quite as much. Again, brush that I've been using this entire time, depending on where, well, taxes are where you live, 35, 37 cents. Something bad happens to it. That's not unusual for all of a sudden my brush to end up in glue or whatever for one reason or another, some kind of mishap. And 37-cent brush with glue in it, it's way less tragic than a $15 brush with glue in it. And actually, these are so rugged, I've cleaned super glue out of them and then painted with them afterwards. Not too bad for 37 cents. So why not give you a little sense of what I was talking about with the purple thing here. So let's find something along the lines of maybe this. Hear me talking about the clear paints all the time. Let's try this. Looks really dark. Yeah. Well, that's good because we're going to darken the shadows with this. Just get some things out of my way here. And what's really nice about the clear paints is, some people, they insist that they're inks. They're not inks. They're just paint. But even though that's about 80% water, the paint itself doesn't break down. So here, see, this is boring. This is a big old mop blue right here. Let's spice it up a little bit. What we're going to do is, see, I'm targeting those deepest shadow areas there. And, if you want to have clear water, that's fine, whatever. Again, the watercolorist to me just uses whatever liquid is present. And then I'm just going to drag that down. So I'm not going to lose overall my blue color there. Grab me a sponge even and take some of the excess away. See how that tints that a little bit? You could have, I guess, mixed a lot of purple in with your paint there and done that and had to paint a whole bunch of layers of paint, but why not just take that purple, do a little bit of a glaze down in there, and where's the other one here? So you can see the difference that not only doesn't necessarily mess with the contrast, but on one side, now we've got ourselves a little bit of a color contrast. Here, again, it's going to be more interesting if I get some of that purple down into these crevices here. Another reason, well, purple and yellow make nice opposites. Now I've got purple and yellow opposite each other, right next to each other. So I'm just going to do a few little shadings on this. And then, because we're right at about an hour, I need to actually see what the quality of this was. It's already an improvement over the last two sessions because I didn't get bounced, or at least I don't think I did. So that's already a vast improvement over Sunday and Monday. So that pretty much takes care of that. I'm going to take my finger, wipe some of that extra stuff away. So what I will do is post this link for the patrons tomorrow if it's all good in terms of quality-wise. So what we were doing again, taking figures that were basically just primed here. We've got our color test figure here. We were feeling our way around Just figuring out the best ways, which colors we wanted where, which will eventually, it's gonna start to evolve a little bit. We start to bring out some lights and darks, and then here, saw what we did with the hair. So the hair, it gives it a little. I can do another brighter highlight too. More of an ice blue on the hair. But now I'm gonna wait till I see what happens with the skin tones. As you can see here, the skin tone, a little bit there is. Yeah, it's got a little more purple to it. Boom, there we go. So who knows, I may actually get you guys another bonus video on this tomorrow where I sort of continue on this. But thanks again for watching. Be sure to subscribe because there are other videos here that are available for everybody else to see. You don't necessarily have to be a patron for that. So thanks again, guys, and I'll hopefully catch you again tomorrow.